We're good?
Whenever you're
Okay.
Yep.
January 17th, meeting of the Rockport School Committee is now in session. Just a reminder that this is being broadcast live and recorded for future viewing. First order of business is the approval of minutes from January 3rd. We're running a little light tonight in terms of we have a quorum, but not all of our members due to illness and other issues. But we do have enough people to ask if there are any amendments or corrections to the meeting minutes.
Nope.
If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept them.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Public comment. If the public wishes to comment on anything on the agenda tonight, now would be the moment to do so. Yes. You can, but you have to come up to the microphone, identify yourself, give us your ATM PIN number, and we'll be all set. And you have to push the
Press
little...
that button.
Yeah.
Okay, so Joanne Hildreth, and I just want to know when the public hearing will be on the budget.
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now.
So,
Press the button.
did press the button.
Just leave it.
Leave it on.
Leave it green.
Oh, at the regular school committee meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
2 weeks from now, public hearing on the budget
Thank you.
for those listening. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you for your question. Correspondence. We do have some correspondence.
We do.
to
So,
review.
Mr. Chair, in your drive, you will see an email from a community member that had been inadvertently CC'd to the wrong school committee box, which is why I did it in this method instead, just so that the school committee was privy to it. And you could see my replies in the thread to this community member about the bus stop, and then I also included Margaret Hale's two-page detailed response to how we evaluate our bus routes every year, our bus stops, and what measures have been taken specifically with this stop. So we're talking about the locations between Dodds Lane, Tars Lane, and Pool, if I have that correct, coming down Main Street from the Gloucester side, before we take a right-hand turn. And so, you know, it's inarguably a difficult spot in town. I don't have to let people know that, you know, people tend to drive faster than they should, generally speaking. And so, as you can see from Ms. Hale's pretty detailed report back to me, that every year Allison and Margaret and the drivers do a really thorough assessment. We really deemed that there were some other spots in town that were way more dangerous, where kids were crossing the main road to the opposite side of the bus. And if you think of the way our town is structured, particularly as you come around the Gloucester side of the coast, it's unrealistic to say children are only going to board a bus from the door side. So as a result, we have some routes where they loop around town, and Margaret has adjusted that route to stop earlier, because that spot right across from Tars Lane, where you take the right to come into the neighborhoods, is a really tough spot, and we were finding that she was trying to block the intersection with a bus, basically, and stop traffic from coming from a lot of angles. So by stopping earlier on the Gloucester end of Main Street, the driver has a view, they can open the door earlier. So I just wanted you to know that we are being responsive. We will continue to look at that stop. I actually came in and sat in the neighborhood a couple times in the past few weeks just to watch it all happen. You know, and as a parent, yeah, it's tough that kids are crossing that street, but we're doing everything we can with signage and with adults out at the bus stops to take care of kids. And the drivers are really cognizant of the traffic patterns on either end. So, as is the case every year, we'll continue to look at that. The community member, if you read the entire email thread, is sort of asking if I will give that particular community member a formal response, and respectfully, I would like the formal response to be here, and I'd like to be able to just say to that community member tomorrow morning that it was addressed at the school committee level, and feel free to check the tape.
So I think, and definitely feel free to weigh in, the things that were reassuring about Margaret Hale's note was there's an annual review to see if we can do this better. There are multiple sets of eyes in terms of Allison and Margaret are driving the route. There's a rehearsal of the students in terms of how they should cross. There's awareness by the bus drivers who conduct those reviews with the students. And I believe there are multiple occasions on which they've done this. So in trying to strike a balance between it's always safety first, but then how do you actually do this when you can't be on both sides of the road for every child? It feels like we've maintained a safe environment.
And you'll see that Chief Horvath was also CC'd on that email. So the
Yeah.
police department and the school department will continue to work around safety in general, whether it's crossing guards or crosswalks or reviews and instruction.
Nicole or Mark, did you?
I just wanted to thank Margaret Hale for her response, because I'm by no means a transportation expert, and her response was very thorough, but it was also written in a way I think that all of us could sort of understand what the process is. Her description of like the safety protocols that the bus drivers go through with the kids, the signals they have, the practices they do, and then how she and Allison preview the routes multiple times and try to find the safest way to be able to get the kids to school. So I just thank you to Allison and to Margaret for that, and Margaret for her really thorough explanation.
I was going to say, I wonder if at the, towards the end of the school year, at one of our last meetings, it might be worth, in the public forum, having a discussion about what the plan is for the upcoming year, and any concerns that the public would have could come to that meeting and raise those concerns at that time, and just have a discussion and, you know, sort of talk about how they determine the routes, why they're doing it that way. Just a quick.
So would you be okay if we did that in like a data collection mode and then gave you the update publicly at the August meeting, only because I know the summer is when
Yeah,
we actually do.
I
We do all
just-
the, we just can't do it in June.
I just don't know if the August one is too late, so that's why, you know, if there were any reasons to change
Good point,
things.
yeah, so
So,
all right,
yeah.
that's a good point, yeah, I'll play with
Yeah,
that.
that's a great idea.
I know when my kids were taking the bus, there was, you know, I had questions. It was kind of hard to get
Okay.
answers sometimes, although I know in this case, the
Yeah.
answers were very thorough and
We also
great,
have changed,
so-
since I've come in, we've really changed the transportation
Yeah.
leadership structure a lot too. So we have an in-house person who
Yeah.
earns a stipend to do that work and a driver.
It's kind of a behind-the-scenes type of thing, and I think if it was out and people knew more
Okay.
about it, it would be
Yeah, I'm good with that.
helpful. Yeah.
I think it's also good to note on the record that other than this stop, and this is the third email about this stop since October, we've received zero, not that I'm inviting it, but we've received zero feedback about other stops. So I do think, in general, this is just a tough spot in town. And you're coming down that main drag, and it's a tough spot.
Do you think there's any value when we do that annual evaluation of asking Chief Horvath if there would be an officer that rides along? So if there's any input they want to give, or at
Sure.
least there would be awareness?
Do that.
Because they might be more, I'm sure they're already supportive, but if there are spots that seem a little bit more concerning than others, they might have an officer there in the mornings to make sure everyone's paying attention.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay,
Thank you.
comments, so that brings us to our Student Advisory Committee rep, Eric.
Eric is with us, so take it away.
All right, so I have a couple updates from the school district. So from the elementary school, there is a group of fifth graders that's organizing a food drive coming up that is going to be going throughout January. That's going to be donations for the Open Door in Gloucester. We've also now opened enrollment for the kindergartners and first graders for the elementary school as well. In the middle school, this past week they've hosted their annual spelling bee. The eighth grade leaders are working hard to prepare their first annual RMS leadership workshop, which is scheduled for next Wednesday. So I'm sure we're all looking forward to that. Shrek the Musical is entering its final stages, and the performances will be held on next Thursday and Friday at 7 and next Saturday at 2. So I know that I'm going to be looking forward to going to see that, and that a lot of people are going to be having a good time there. There's also a new STEM workshop series that the middle school students will have starting Friday. This is being run by Miss Vavaza in conjunction with Anna Drost, who's a current senior in the high school. These workshops will feature local professional guests who work in STEM industries and will allow students to ask questions about future job opportunities, as well as experience hands-on design tasks, challenges, and experiments. The program will run on Mondays and Fridays for the next few weeks. And then some high school announcements. I just wanted to give a quick congratulations to the roughly 70 RHS students that attended this week's DECA competition, which is a big accomplishment for all of them. The high school is now wrapping up its first semester with its midterm exams this week, and winter sports are continuing to do great and have had many wins throughout the last month. The Student Council is preparing for its annual Spirit Week festivities to take place the week before February vacation as well, and there's an upcoming calendar raffle in February that will be helping to fund the yearbooks.
Great. You want to do an Insta poll of the Drost family members? How did Eric do tonight? Thumbs up. Good. Thank you, Eric. That was great. Oh, wait, we have
We have
more
a
than a
family
quorum.
quorum.
Wow, we have a full house. Excellent. Well, almost. Almost. There's one member missing. So, Mark, thank you, Eric. That was great. That would lead us to the Policy Committee, Subcommittee update. Did you want to, you're certainly capable of doing this without Amy, who couldn't be here tonight, but do you want to wait for her, or would you like to do it?
No, I think I can do it.
Excellent.
Yeah. We actually have no update. How does that work?
Oh, that's pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Pretty concise.
We are pausing right now. We'll pick back up with the review in a couple weeks and jump back into it. We do have, I think, our second read, is that right, on
Right,
section K?
Yes.
So I think we want to go ahead and do that now.
So if you remember, Amy had supplied us with pretty good notes at the last meeting to give you a full review of Section K. So we'll just need a motion to accept Section K in form.
Were there any, I don't think so, but were there any questions or concerns or amendments? If not, okay, so I'll entertain a motion to accept Section K of our policies manual as presented.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Okay. So then we move on to fiscal year '25 budget development. So for those of us who have never been in the audience for this process before, it's an annual one where the town does not fund us at 100% of our needs. So then we have to spend the winter months essentially trying to use whatever levers we have to reconcile that. So this is one in a series. Mark, what would you like to share with us tonight?
So I certainly will not read this slide to the committee, but this is out of the draft budget book. It's a similar two-paragraph statement that was in last year's budget book, and it just simply points out what we've talked about in our last couple of meetings, that we're holding strong at a $6.9 million proposed budget, looking for the town to support that at a 2.7%, which is just over $14.3 million, and that I just think the steady increase from 2.3 to 2.5 and the hope for 2.7 is a respectful amount of growth in the ask category to the taxpayers, particularly when you look at the increasing amount of cuts that we're going to propose tonight. So I do think it's respectful to say we're being fiscally responsible, but at the same time, we're asking the taxpayers for a modest increase from 2.5 to 2.7. Similarly, this represents a super conservative increase in our total growth of under 2% at 1.58. And I dare say I haven't been involved in that small amount of growth in probably ever. So, in combination with with roughly $1 million in cuts that we're going to discuss tonight, and a really conservative growth of 1.58%, believe it or not, we're still going to be able to redistribute staffing in a positive way, and we're going to be able to enhance programming as we did last year. And that's really difficult to do both of those things, but I'm proud of the work that the leadership team has done to try to be responsible with the taxpayer dollar and at the same time provide our students with really high quality educational programming for the future. So that's kind of how that first paragraph lays out. The second paragraph just reminds us that we have 3 or 4 drivers that really are behind the increase in this budget. If you all recall, last year the legislature approved a whopping 14% increase to tuition in approved non-consortium special education program tuitions. They've now added on a 4.69 on top of last year's 14%. So in 2 years, that's a substantial increase to our students who are in non-collaborative settings. Similarly, as we've discussed on multiple meetings now, the collaborative itself finds itself in a position with some serious infrastructure needs, and we've already discussed those in a couple other meetings. And so the board of directors, which I am a member of, found ourselves in a position where we had to vote to increase tuition at the Kevin O'Grady School to the tune of 14%, and all other consortium schools to the tune of 8%. So those increases right there alone are pretty substantial. We also clearly have an anticipated salary increase coming up through collective bargaining, and the, sometimes overwhelming cost of fuel and power increases annually are something all municipalities are dealing with. And that creates our approximate gap of $787,000. And just to put that in perspective for people who weren't paying full attention or in the loop last year, we had about $354,000 increase last year. So we've gone from a $354,000 budget gap last year to $787 and change. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the strategies to close the budget gap, as well as the programmatic and staffing priorities that kind of go hand in hand with moving the district forward. It is difficult work. It is difficult conversations to have, and most importantly, it's people's lives and people's professions. So in this public setting, I want us all to be, cognizant of those conversations and of the reality of what we discussed tonight. Since the last meeting 2 weeks ago, the leadership team has worked as a full team in small groups and individually. We've developed a plan to close this budget gap while also developing hopeful plans for programmatic and staffing priorities. I've met with the RTA presidents to review the strategies to close the gap. Principals have met with individual staff members who will be losing their jobs due to the reduction in force. And today I held voluntary staff meetings at both schools to provide the staff with updates prior to tonight's meeting. I will continue to proactively hold as many of those meetings as we need to make sure that there's some transparency with the internal stakeholders and that we all understand we don't want to put anybody in a position where we're discussing something publicly here that they really haven't been privy to ahead of time. And that is how we did business last year, and I'm happy that we can continue to do it that way. So what you have in your drive, first is the programmatic staffing priorities. And so this budget does support some enhancements that are important to move teaching and learning forward and to move the educational opportunities for our students forward. We went forward with $100,000 in programming and professional development around adding computer science and engineering programming at the high school last year. We had said at that meeting last year when the budget passed that we need to make sure our kids who take engineering have a second engineering option moving forward to prepare them for the college if that's their pathway. So we're going to continue with our partnership with Project Lead the Way, and we will continue to do that work and add a second engineering course. And what's really exciting is the ability to kind of drill down to the middle school level, and add 3 programs through our current STEM offerings: app creators, magic of electrons, and medical detectives, which are sort of the precursor engineering and computer science programming for Project Lead the Way. And that gets funded through curriculum budget, through the technology department, which I can't thank enough every year for the town's support there, and some pretty aggressive grants that Jody Goodhue is working with Project Lead the Way on at this moment in time. So that's pretty exciting that we'll have high school and middle school students benefiting from a really nice menu of course offerings that can prepare them for future studies, both in computer science and in engineering. We would like to take a look at redesigning literacy and mathematics support at the middle high school with the one school model. And so we would like to put together 2 positions, literacy acceleration specialist and a mathematics acceleration specialist at the middle high school that could be used to support our Tier 1 programming, our MTSS initiatives that are rolling up from the elementary into the middle school in future years, and make sure we're really providing for our students who are below grade level and expectations in those 2 content areas. So those staff members will be identified internally, and that we anticipate Principal Rose being able to work with the staff to make sure we have a good program of support 6 to 12 for our struggling students in literacy and mathematics. We've also identified a need for an instructional coach at the elementary school as we moved with the MTSS model. We have a steering committee at the elementary school working on our Tier 1 and our MTSS support, and we really think we could benefit from having an instructional coach embedded in the school day, non-evaluatory RTA position, providing job-embedded professional development support with the intent of providing students with more impactful learning experience. It's differentiated to meet their needs based on the data and the data meetings. So those positions, literacy and math support at the middle high school and instructional coach at the elementary school, we think could be game changers when it comes to supporting teachers' abilities and students' abilities to move forward. The next one would be a combination restructure that you'll see in the budget cut proposal would be a restructure of our elementary leadership, a combination position, assistant principal / special education facilitator. One, with declining enrollment, we want to make sure we're cognizant of trends regionally around how many administrators are appropriate or impactful, I guess would be a better word, to support the needs of teachers and students based on enrollment and based on the amount of adults we have working with those students. Secondarily, the leadership team and I have really kind of come to consensus in the fact that we need more robust professional special ed leadership at the building level to manage a 3-year evaluation process, potentially evaluations, and just the way we implement structures and strategies in special ed. So this will give us some, what we think is some needed professional leadership in special education at the elementary level. Similarly, you'll see the position at the high school, middle school as a special ed facilitator. That's not a combination position. These 2 positions will also continue to pick up the out-of-district coordinator piece as well. We have a certain amount of students that have out-of-district services, and it's unrealistic to have the director of student services working as your out-of-district coordinator fully. And if you remember, when I first got here, we were actually paying a retired special education leader a pretty substantial stipend to be our out-of-district coordinator. So that was a cost savings last year when we made that cut, and then rolled modest stipend work into this work this year. And that has seemed to be fruitful so far, both financially and from a leadership standpoint. And the final one is one that I think we've talked about before, that we've identified a gap in curriculum leadership, curriculum instruction assessment, and data from a management standpoint. And we would like to propose a director of teaching and learning position that will really kind of codify the work, shoulder-to-shoulder leadership with principals and with teacher-led content leaders, so that we can really have some good systemic value to our curriculum review and adoption cycle, to our instructional programming, and ultimately to our resource acquisition and implementation when it comes to long-term planning for curriculum. All of those tie, interestingly enough, to the next page. So I can do this a couple ways, Mr. Chair, if you want to ask questions individually about what I just discussed, or if you want to go through the programmatic priorities and the reductions and connect them all. It's really up to you. I could put that ball in your court.
You know,
They do tie together pretty
yeah, pretty,
seamlessly.
go ahead, Nicole, you
I was just wondering if we could, I feel like I might lose my
Your
train of thought.
button?
Oh. I just had some, I was wondering if we could ask some questions here first,
It's up
because
to
it
you.
might cover questions that are
Yep.
kind of on the next, and I don't want to
Yep, totally up to you.
lose my train of thought here. So I just had a question about the RES assistant principal / special education facilitator. And I guess the RMHS. So are these, excuse me if this is a silly question, but are these in addition to the current team chair? Or is
No.
this taking the team chair out of
Correct.
the RTA,
Correct.
making an administrative position? So at the elementary school, right now, there's a full-time team chair.
Correct.
It would become a half-time position with the, or would it depend on, because you're talking about legally?
It's
what
honestly
we
going
need
to
do?
depend on the day. We had a really good, robust conversation around it, because it's not a union position, you don't have to identify it as a 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, right? It's an administrative
It's
position.
flexible
So
depending
you have
on-
a job description, and on one day, you could be playing a heavy load of assistant principal, and another day, you could be fully playing special ed facilitator, and on another day, it could be half your day. So it's really dependent upon the need.
And they are also the out-of-district coordinator.
They will split it. This year, we have 3 people splitting that. Martha takes a pretty small but heavy caseload, and then our 2 special ed team chairs split the rest of that. It would be a similar model next year. What we gain here, just so people understand legally, is by law, a licensed administrator identified by the district is the only person who legally is supposed to commit funds on behalf of the district. And so every time we have a meeting that a principal or an assistant principal are not in, we're technically not compliant when we commit funds. funds are not normally committed in an annual meeting. They are absolutely committed through the IEP development process and at the 3-year evaluation process. So again, these are conversations we've had since I came here to just make sure we don't put ourselves in an audit situation with DESE or with the Department of Special Education. And quite honestly, so that we're more consistent in how we develop IEPs and hold ourselves accountable for the implementation of that work.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about the process? When you say positions will be, or teachers will be reassigned, so do you have to do any sort of posting for those positions and take outside applications, or reassignment means you can, existing teachers?
Yeah, I don't want to, clearly, we don't want to put anybody else out of a
Right.
position, right? So we have so many people, this is bad language, I apologize, but we have so many people left standing, right, in positions. And we want to make sure that we can identify really strong talent internally and give them an opportunity to impact kids in a positive way through some of these new created positions. So the intent is absolutely to make these through the RTA.
Okay.
Yeah, current.
And then another question I had, can you give an update, now that we're about halfway through the year, the courses for the Project Lead the Way, how those are going?
That's actually going to be after we settle on the budget. In March, we have a couple curriculum reviews coming your way.
Okay.
Yeah, so you
Yeah,
will
we'll
get
get
them.
that.
I'd rather you got them from the right people than anecdotally from me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mark, I think before we move on to the most difficult part of this, I think it's worth stating, because I've been here for a while, and this often has come up during override years and in every budgeting year, where people have a lot of opinions in public about the funding of the schools, that really, on behalf of the school committee, the mission is not to fund the best school we can regardless of cost, and it's not to fund the best school we can at the least cost. It's that we create a school that best meets the needs of the students in our care. And unfortunately, that necessarily means change, and that change shouldn't be informed by individual opinion, but best practices in the industry. And I think one of the criteria we had for hiring you into this position was that you had that sort of mindset and data-focused approach to doing those sorts of evaluations and then activating them into actual practice. So I know that it's very upsetting for all of us to see reductions in staff at all. But in terms of and I'll just say it out loud, in terms of the Rockport schools, we have, I think, a phenomenal group of teachers. But that being said, there's been a fly in amber quality to the school where we have not had any reductions for many years that are very common in every other school district that surrounds us and are in the state. And I think I don't make this point as well as Amy Oakes, who couldn't be here tonight, who has worked as a principal in another state, in another district. So I think as painful as this is, the rationale that's been used to arrive at this is not really informed by, we need to close the gap this year, we need to close the gap every year. It has to do with what sort of offerings we can make, what sort of needs our students have, and how do we best address them. So I'm glad we started with the programmatic and staffing priorities and adjustments, because it really speaks to the quality of the program and the fact that we can't just keep offering things that maybe are out of sequence with what the outside world is expecting of our students. And I think these are great additions. And as we come to this difficult part, as hard as it is, and for those of us who come from the outside world, outside of education, where this is also an annual occurrence in outside industry, I think the supporting rationale, the thoughtfulness with which the administrative leadership team has gone about this, the collaborative way in which they've tried to engage where possible, at least makes it feel like it's been a much more rational process, and it certainly has not been a panicky, we need to get a certain amount of money out of this effort. So I know if you're impacted, as I've been in my life with one of these actions in the past, that doesn't feel great. It doesn't remove some of the pain of change, but I feel comforted a little bit by the fact that this has been a very thoughtful exercise that has kept its focus on what are we offering the students and how do we best use the resources we have. So thank you and the leadership team for that, and for the staff and interacting and at least trying to get their heads around, the impact of it, which, does impact people that are peers and folks that they've worked alongside with for many years. But at least I think we have the reassurance that the focus has been brought about with a real eye on best practices with the industry and what the students will be needing going forward.
One other thing we talked about a lot at this table, and that we've talked about with curriculum leaders and we've talked about with the leadership team members, is sustainable change, right? So we came here, we had a great presentation around physics first as a new model at the high school. If we had implemented physics first or partnered with Project Lead the Way and then pulled the rug out from under the students in the community, that wouldn't have been really successful or thoughtful as well. So every change initiative that we propose that we hope to engage in, including our partnerships around ELA work and literacy work at the elementary school, and our ongoing math work at the elementary school, all of that work has to be sustainable, and it has to lead to student growth and student achievement. And ultimately, that's the job and that's the hope. So clearly, we probably in the room had other, this list of programmatic and staffing priorities is probably a lot longer. But we really did prioritize what we thought fits into the budget and what is most important right now. And the ones that I proposed tonight that the team really is pretty confident on should be addressed first. So when you get to the strategies, I'm going to, let me preface this where I did a few minutes ago, that principals have already met with individual staff members who will be personally impacted. I think that's important to say again because I'm not going to discuss names tonight. It is possible, because we're so small, that if we're not careful, identifying positions then could potentially put us in a position where we know someone, and I'm going to do my best to make sure we don't do that. So I'll caution us to ask certain types of questions that also don't put us in that position. And if I can't answer. But out of the protection of HR and people's professional lives, I want to make sure we're careful. At the top of this reduction list, this was not the case last year, so I wanted to make sure this was really reflective in the budget book this year. We had an anomaly where we had 3 positions vacated after the town voted on the budget on town meeting floor. That's at least rare in my experience. So we passed a budget in April of last year, and then we had a high school English teacher retire. We had an elementary special education position vacated at the beginning of this particular school year, and then we had a high school world language teacher position vacated at late in the summer, if I have my timeline correct. That equates to roughly, I'm estimating, roughly $250,000. And so, as someone more eloquently than I said in a meeting that I held today, this bottom line cut of $761,000, or our proposed gap, would be close to $250,000 more, had that not occurred. So I don't want it lost on us, on the staff, or on the community, that when you look at this entire page, there's a total reduction of over $1 million at the bottom of this list that does include that 250, and then the next level of reductions equate to 761,886. That's how we close the gap. But I think it's super important that we recognize that's $1 million in reductions. So I'll just pause on that for a second. So those 3 positions at the top happen after the town meeting vote. At the elementary school, you'll see that it's a 4 FTE reduction in elementary school teachers. I will tell you that one of those is the result of a retirement, and you can see that the staffing pattern is laid out here. So we will continue with 2 teachers in pre-K. We'll continue with 3 teachers in kindergarten. We'll have 2 in first grade, 2 in second grade, 2 in third grade. We'll continue the 2 in fourth, and we'll have 2 in fifth. And all classes are projected to be within the school committee recommended class size that is currently recommended through our policy. So that's the first reduction. The next two I'm going to bulk together. Those are basically the equivalent of 2 middle school and high school teaching positions. One is identified on there more particularly than the other one that you have in front of you. The third one down is reduction of one non-professional staff member identified as middle high school administrative assistant. Again, that we come into seniority and qualifications in some of these positions. The next cut is over $108,000 in the restructuring of the leadership team. 14,863 is the gain. So by keeping just over $14,000 off that cut sheet, the value added is there in the leadership restructure. Everything after that is non-personnel related. It inadvertently reductions in the COLA reserves, because if someone gets riffed, then we don't have to budget for the COLA increase. RTA retirements, at this point in time, we have 1 of 5 offered accepted, so we're going to budget with 1 being accepted. If that changes, that will change our budget to some extent. The Medicaid clerk stipend was a paid stipend to an admin assistant in the special ed department. That work was actually rolled into that individual's contract through a renegotiation this past year. We're going to partially fund the central office assistant with grant funding. I believe we've done that in the past. This year, thank you. And then some small reductions to central office supplies, athletics. We're going to fund contractual column movements at 60%. I think we've had that conversation already, where members are supposed to let us know by such and such a date if they anticipate column movement. June has done some historical tracking on that, and generally speaking, about 60% of the people who put in for it actually take it, or get it, or earn it, however we want to phrase that. So we're not going to over budget for that. And then we do believe we'll have some modest savings in electricity costs based on all of our light projects. So all of that adds up to a little over $1 million in reductions, with the gap number right around $761,000. That leaves us, probably with about $25,000, June. I'm ballparking that. Am I
Yes,
yes.
right around there, 21 to 25,000.
Which, quite honestly, is by the time we have our meeting in 2 weeks, is not a problem to close that once everything
So
settles.
that's the remaining
That's the remaining,
gap
that's
as
the
of
remaining
this
gap
moment.
as of right now. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll take a breath and open that up to questions.
So the total number of administrative staff, if I'm doing math in my head correctly, it's like roughly 5%, under 5% of the total bodies in the system. Employee base is what I should have said.
Correct.
Okay, it's good to know. I mean, that feels like not an inordinate amount of non-teaching staff, for example, so, okay.
Just on that comment, Michael, if I could, there is actually a very useful tool on the DC website that I was looking at today, and it's called the DART tool, and you can look at DC gives us comparable districts, maybe like 6 or 7 comparable districts, what they say they are. And you can actually, there's an Excel spreadsheet where you can choose comparable districts, and then you can sort by staffing patterns, you can sort by all kinds of things. So it actually lets you see, because I tried to go on different school websites, and school websites we're doing a good job in Rockport. Difficult to navigate and learn anything from. But I thought it was a really interesting exercise to do that and look at staffing patterns and kind of see that as far as administrators to teaching staff, whatever, we are well within or on the lower side of our comparable districts for those ratios. So that was just, I thought that was interesting, and it was a good tool to kind of look at and go through and get some more information about that.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of good stuff on that DESE site in terms of, but you do have to dig and root around in order to actually access it. So in terms, Mark, the other thing that is really important, of course, is this is upsetting to everybody in terms of over-communicating this. You've mentioned that you've had
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think we have another meeting tomorrow with union leadership. So we're going to continue to meet with union leadership to make sure both sides understand exactly what the rollout looks like, what the ramifications are, what our value added moving forward looks like, as well as how we're going to take care of staff members who are being reduced. The administrative team is there, ready to answer questions. I'm there, ready to answer questions. It's not why anybody gets into education. It's not why anybody takes a leadership position. But respectfully, I feel like when I was hired, the charge was pretty clear. That it was, let's keep us a viable school district. There wasn't a lot of conversation anymore about merging with other districts. We're proud of Rockport. We want to make sure we are here for a long time, and that's going to take some serious fiscal responsibility and some change. We're having conversations about class size. I know there are concerns around AP and honors or CP and honors combination courses. We actually had those conversations today already with some department heads in my office. We will continue to have those conversations about what best practice is and isn't in some places. I have made good or bad my opinion known to some people on that already, and I believe the principals have thoughts, and then we do have to kick that back to the curriculum leaders, the teachers who are in the classrooms every day, and get their ideas for how the best way to handle that is. In a really small district, when you only have so many kids identified, however they're identified, whether that's through a waiver or through a process internally, for AP, honors, and CP, and we only have so many human resources, sometimes we combine so that kids get to take the level they get. And I don't think my son would mind this, plus I know he's not watching this. I've joked that we don't raise mathematicians and scientists necessarily in the Branco House. And so I'm also well aware, because I'm in the industry, of what colleges are looking for, and they're looking for rigorous programming, and they're looking for kids to challenge themselves. So my own son, who's going to be a political science economics major, hopefully in a year, took 2 honors level science classes because he wanted to make sure he was marketable and challenged and ready for college and could be looked at similarly. If we don't offer the right tiers and we don't set the bar higher for kids, we're actually shutting the door on opportunities for kids sometimes, and we don't think about that. So combining levels is not always ideal, and yes, I understand for an adult sometimes it's harder work, and for a kid it's a different learning environment, but sometimes it's actually in the best interest of the kids at that moment in time in a small school. We will continue to work with the teacher leaders and the content teachers around what's the best way to do it, particularly at the high school. But I would rather do that than not offer a level. And I think that's been a real conversation in-house, and I've heard it outside of the 4 walls of the schoolhouse as well this year. So I just want to make sure when we talk about staffing patterns, and we talk about some of these moves, some of the placement of students and combination of levels actually wasn't necessarily just a relationship to downsizing in staff. It was also to accommodate the needs of kids. Other thoughts on some of this?
Could I just ask, I'm thinking especially of the elementary school parents, it's a big change, right? We're going from, in most grades, we're going from 3 to 2. And what, I'm sure there are discussions about how to best communicate this with the families and reassure them about staying within the class size policy and sort of have that sort of extra communication. I know they can come to the public budget workshop, but in reality, most people may not make it, and so there are discussions about how we're communicating that to families.
Yes.
Or there will be.
One, we need to, I'm sorry. Once we pass a budget in 2 weeks, we know that that's a preliminary school-approved budget, school committee-approved budget, and then at that point, we can start to have some community outreach with families around what that will look like. And in a further future presentation, once the financial dust settles a little bit, I'll come back to you with our projections. The NASDAQ 10-year projection will be in the book like it was last year, and then we have our internal projections because we tend to know a little more granularly how many kids are going to go out to tech schools and private schools. So we have.
So my question was going to be that, without giving, can you just generally say, are those class sizes sort of going to be on the max end of the limits now, or how does it sort of look generally?
So in first grade is well below still. Second grade is at the bottom number. Third grade is right in the middle.
Okay.
Fourth grade is on the high end because that's a bubble group. Fifth grade is actually below.
Okay.
I think that's what's really difficult to hear.
Yeah.
The district is feeling the declining enrollment at the elementary school first.
Right.
The high school's not going to feel it for 5 years because these little ducklings need to move up.
I had one question about the CP honors classes.
Yeah.
Given current trends and like how classes are shaping up this year and like in previous years, do you have an idea on like how many classes would have to possibly go into CP honors combined in the coming years?
Not in the moment. I can tell you carefully that we've had conversations with curriculum leaders around which is a more appropriate combination, CP and honors or honors and AP. There is a best practice around combining honors and AP because in some cases, if the child just doesn't take the AP exam, they earn the honors credit,
Yeah.
as opposed to blending CP and honors kids. So I can't give you an exact answer yet because clearly we don't have enrollment numbers and course
Yeah.
selection done. And honestly, the course of studies is in a pretty early draft. And the middle school, high school schedule is still in a draft, right? So all of that's going to be fast and furious between now and March 1st, I would suspect.
All right.
But I'm okay saying that because we've had good conversations even as recent as today in my office around that. What makes more sense if you have to combo CP and honors or honors and AP? And generally speaking, what I've heard from faculty is honors and AP.
Yeah, I think a lot of students would agree with that as well.
And I think I heard that from you at the student leadership team as well.
Yeah.
So Mark, one other question. If Amy were here, if I were channeling Amy, one of the things she'd say is in most districts, there's an annual fine tuning. It's not a major restructuring like that. So this, this comes as a fairly traumatic exercise in a district where we haven't seen in action at all in 12, 15 years for the teacher in the system. And I'm looking at this programmatic and staffing priorities. There's a great student benefit attached to each category, so we have a really clear view of how we're addressing the student needs. But if I'm a teacher right now, living through this, still here, how does their life get better in the long term with some of these support positions? Because I imagine there should be, in a direct alignment with student need and some positions that are now attempting to address them in different ways, what is the benefit to the classroom teacher?
So at the elementary school, the hope is if we can actually pull off the instructional coach piece, that will get some really good job-embedded PD and support that is not coming in an evaluative way. It's actually coming from another colleague who's been trained up in that. And again, that aligns with our really tighter focus on MTSS and Tier 1 instruction at the elementary school. It also aligns to the work we've done in mathematics and the really early work we're doing in literacy. So we feel like by having a point person there who can really be that support in and out of the classrooms, pulling small groups of teachers, working in a tandem co-teaching way, depending what the schedule looks like. We believe there's some good value added there. We have had interventionists and have interventionists at the middle school. We think by expanding to a 6 to 12 model, particularly 6 to 10, because that's where the almighty MCAS tends to hit, we do think that we can really leverage two professional positions and have a really robust, impactful math interventionist and literacy interventionist. And the hope there is it's not all on the classroom teacher to close the gap for kids who are below grade level or even just identified as struggling. So if we're holding data meetings in PLCs or in grade level team meetings and we're identifying that struggle, it's not just on us to do it in a win block or in a differentiated way, but we could have two professionals, middle high school, who could focus on a small percentage of kids, 10% in the grade, 7% in the grade, depending what the data boards out. So we do believe that if you don't support teachers, you're not supporting kids. I mean, it's, you have to do both here. While it's super difficult to talk about the other list, if we don't add some of these positions that really high-performing school districts have, instructional coaches and multiple interventionists, then we're going to be spinning our wheels trying to meet kids, and people will get frustrated.
You had just mentioned that I think you said, if you get that instructional coach up and running at the elementary school, are there challenges with that? Or is that just purely based on passing the budget?
Right.
Yeah, right. Oh, and then another question, with the early retirement, was the deadline on February 1st? Was that right?
Yep.
Yes.
So it's coming up. So are there any word about other people maybe accepting those, or do you think it'll just be the one?
I'll tell you at the next meeting.
All right. We don't know.
No.
Okay.
And then just to follow up on that, what is the feedback loop you're anticipating for after the dust clears, after we've installed some of these new priority addressments isn't even a word, but what is the feedback loop for teachers in this a year or two out in terms of how is this supporting their needs? How does that information sort of trickle up to that district leadership team?
My hope is as authentically as possible. I mean, if we get a couple of these positions in there, then we can have real conversations at the school level about the impact an instructional coach has, the impact of having multiple interventionists or acceleration specialists. And in a perfect world, you're going to have those in every school, and you're going to have coaches in every school. Bigger districts with larger resources, that is the model. And teachers that I know in other districts and administrators that I know in others report that support allows them to meet the needs of a broader spectrum of kids more deeply. I mean, it's data driven. It's just that we're doing it in small chunks.
Okay.
How many of these, I guess, duties that are currently being done by stipends with teachers that, I guess my question is, will there be savings on stipends that teachers are being paid to do any of this work already?
Off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
Okay, and then in terms of next steps, so the impacted individuals, there have been conversations, there have been public outreach meetings, there are more to come.
We'll have another meeting with union leadership tomorrow just to sort of disseminate this and next steps. And then, we'll refine the number to get to 0 instead of 25.
Right.
And then the full budget book will be published and presented to you all as a draft in 2 weeks like it was last year. And then, provided it's passed that evening, the following 2 days later, depends how long it takes to get literally through the press, we'll have them pressed. And the budget book will be like it was last year. It'll be at the library, it'll be on the website, it'll be out in the public, it'll go to the FinCom Board of Selectmen. We got really positive feedback for, dare I say, flooding the community with that budget book last year and being as transparent as possible, as early as possible. And then we would then, Mr. Chair, engage in meetings proactively, however we roll that out with the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom prior to April.
Right. So I guess if there are no other questions, so just sort of functionally, the way our agenda works is comment from the public is used to inform the decision-making capacity of the committee. So for comments about these actions and the budget, now that this is a public document, at our next meeting, if someone wanted to comment or question in here, that would be the appropriate time for that. So that structure isn't to prohibit getting any input at all. It's really that we are using it to inform how we vote essentially and how we debate. So that would be the meeting for anyone who wants to make comment, either in the audience or who's watching. That's the opportunity to really come in and share any feelings or questions that you have about it. So I think that would then move us to a more prosaic donations. Looks like we have a generous donation from Mr. and Mrs. Robert Welcome to support the Music Scholarship Fund.
And again, every single meeting, it feels like now, the philanthropic vibe coming from this community is unbelievable. Thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Welcome for $350 to the Music Scholarship Fund. If we add up the slides and we add up the donations this year, it's unbelievable. I just continue to be thankful and impressed by the support the community gives us.
Right. So then we have a new school calendar that's required approve them?
So in your drive, you have what I hope is the one and only version, but as we know, that's not always the case. So this is the proposed school calendar. It's got a preliminary prom date, so as we know, the prom drives potentially the last half day of the year. And so with that said, this is our best estimate right now. And I reserve the right to come back to you at some point before August with a change. But right now, we feel pretty good about this. My senior son has made it very clear that public school children in Massachusetts got totally gypped by this year's December break. And then he saw this on my desk at home and lost it because it's a fantastic December break next year. So if you're sorry to the seniors, and if you're a junior, woohoo!
Has there been any feedback on the format? Because now I mean, it's comprehensive,
great,
it's
yeah.
accessible to
Yeah.
people with color blindness. No names.
So yes, thank you to Amanda for all of her hard work on putting this together and for accommodating her needy boss.
And then this will be posted, obviously, on the new website.
Yes, once,
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Once
once approved, yeah.
Did you have a question,
I
Mark?
was just gonna ask, thinking about not for this calendar year that we have in front of us, but going forward. Is there feedback or, about the professional development days on the early release? So the early release and then you do professional development in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Any, thoughts about doing full day professional development?
We have one in October. And right now, the more pressing feedback that I received in the middle of year one last year was the community really liked keeping it on a Tuesday. Like, they like just knowing the predictability of like, so if I have
Early
daycare or if
release
I
day,
needs, or if I work from
professional
home one day a
yeah.
week, I can set that up in my life. If
Right.
I'm an employee and I'm working and I need to worry about medical appointments or family commitments and stuff, they felt, so the feedback we received originally was lock it in. The prom just breaks that rule in May. But other than that, that's the feedback we've received. Yeah.
Great. Nicole, any questions or good? Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the 24-25 school calendar as presented?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Seems funny to do that with 3 people. Fund flow update.
Did you want to do the next timeline, the negotiation?
Yeah, just a
Oh,
quick
sorry, I
update that
jumped right over
sorry,
that.
just a quick update that
Sorry.
the snow day destroyed our original meeting timeline.
Yeah.
And so now we are on track for a meeting on the 24th of January and the 5th of February with a third date to be named later.
Excellent.
That's all I got
Okay,
for you.
look forward to that.
And if you recall, this is the newer version that people seem to be really happy with on the fund flow. So you have both of these documents in your drive. I think I made copies, or I think Amanda made copies of both of them, is that right? Okay.
So what you're seeing from the first quarter is pretty much still on track. We've actually gained a little bit more in our end-of-year reserve, not that much, under 100,000. That is due to Allison doing a great deep dive on the encumbrance list of the salaries, which is the bulk of our budget. Also a tightening of the sped outlook, especially for our outer district placements, and what that is looking like. The good news is that we have less salary need. Unfortunately, the preliminary school choice in number is lower than what was budgeted. So that kind of offsets each other, and that's why you're seeing a number, an end number in yellow on the right hand of basically almost the same. So the good news is still on track. There's no sudden surprises. We have absorbed all the unanticipated capital expenses without affecting our estimated end-of-year reserve. So we're still on track and getting more and more comfortable with that number.
And you know, happy is a funny word, right, tonight, but really happy with the fact that 1.6 million is holding pretty strong. You know, in context with tonight's meeting, when we talk about literally making $1 million in cuts, if we're not making, you know, some tough decisions around finances, that 1.6 million in reserve is close to depleted. And we know
That would trigger an override
and it would trigger
immediately.
immediate override, and we know that we're not in that position to be looking for that at this point in time. So the projection is sound. And, you know, the school choice, we talked about this in the past, the percentage is held true at 25%. But when you have less children in general in Massachusetts, then 25% of less than last year is less children. So when you're getting roughly $5,000 per school choice student, it's not that we have less kids opting to come to Rockport, we have less children going to school in Massachusetts.
And also a reminder, especially with the school choice number, just because you might say there's 10% less children coming to Rockport from outside, it doesn't mean that it's a concrete number. Some are on IEPs, and some may be high needs that have graduated, and the ones that have come in that may not have an IEP at all, or those might have less needs, and therefore you're not getting as much money. So that is a number that's in flux, and you really don't know that number until you've submitted it in April. So that's why you can't say with direct confidence that we're going to receive X amount of money this year. DESI goes about doing an estimate based on prior years and what they've seen with the October 1st reporting of student enrollments. However, the sped increment is always unknown until the end.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the extraordinary relief information that we're just becoming privy to from the state?
I don't have
Whatever
as
you're comfortable
much.
saying.
Yeah. We, because of the issues of last year, that huge increase, DESI is allowing for any unforeseen increases that obviously weren't budgeted, especially by us that budget earlier in the year, vote at town meetings earlier. We're allowed to apply for some additional funds. Currently, there have been some training classes. Cheryl Keating will be taking the bulk of that work, of doing all the research. It's also based on our foundation, net school spending numbers. There's many, many factors involved, but we hope to recoup some funds. They're being very generous. They're allowing, in some cases, that you can apply for that amount and the standard extraordinary relief, that you can apply twice. It'll be in one application, and that usually also happens in April, sometimes the end of March, depending on what DESI wants, and they're planning to move that up a little bit. So we hopefully will have at least an answer on the extraordinary relief piece much earlier in the year, where you just sometimes get it notified in June, whether you've received money or not. So we will know whether we qualify for any of that. Of course, that will help us maintain what we planned, and also maybe help out with that 14%
Right.
that's coming.
Right.
And the good news about that is the way that the consortium has decided to bill the membership for those construction in a tuition manner. We have had approval from Jay Sullivan, the district commissioner at DESI, that those do qualify for that extraordinary relief application. So it would be very nice that now all of a sudden you get state help as well, of not having to dip into our reserves to cover that 14% fully on this year's number. Next year, yes, it's part of our budget, but the increase that they're going, it's not an increase, what was it, an assessment? But they're calling it tuition, the way they're doing it, instead of a flat-out assessment. They're going to bill it in tuition for those particular students in those particular buildings that are being needed to be addressed, and therefore now they qualify for that extraordinary relief application.
And I think what's important to point out for the public is that superintendents, business managers, and MASBO and MASS have been seriously advocating at the State House with DESI and with our government officials on, helping us deal with what was basically, done to us with those increases. So we'll give credit where credit is due, that there's a lot of organizations lobbying for support, and that the state is actually reacting to that.
That's hopeful. Could we, in the future, just a thought, I don't think, if the premise is to show the public our fund flows on overhead and online, I don't think any of this is legible for anyone sitting in the audience, so it's kind of,
Make it bigger.
Yes,
Yeah, gotcha.
legible would be the word that comes to mind, yep.
Yes, usually the one on the right is, as you know,
Yeah, yeah, and
it's
it's
3
not-
pages long.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, I think we should break it out in a way that if someone, God bless them, were coming in to look at these numbers, they should be able to see them. That
I'll
would
pull
be
it,
Yes.
you can pull it into multiple slides, that's fine.
All right. So that would bring us questions about the fund flow.
So,
We're for it in general? Good, okay. School committee discussion, are there any walk-on items that anyone
Nope.
has tonight?
I just wanted to go back, though, to our, when we approved the Section K,
Yes, sir.
I don't know if we use the language
Was
of
the second-
inform and that it's going to take effect when the full policy. I just want to clarify that.
Yes, I
was-
believe
was
we
ever-
said that, absolutely.
We'll make sure the notes
We'll make
reflect
sure.
that.
If not, we just did it.
Right,
Okay.
absolutely. So that would leave us at executive session, and I think we do have a need for the purposes of contract negotiation. We're not going to vote on anything after we come out of that, so this would be the point where we end the meeting because that's held in private. So thank you, everybody, for coming. It's nice to have people in the chairs tonight. I should have taken a photo just so got a record of it.